Hi guys, and we're back at home. I'm playing a little catch up. Today, once again, is the 20th of April, and we are continuing our study of the period between World War One and World War Two, beginning today with the discussion of the history of the relationship of China and Japan and how China became a communist country, as we're going to see in the video that we just left. And by the way, I have to find the right assignment. Forgive me. Come on now, I know where it's at. Can you believe we've done all these? Look at this. A lot of work right here, and you guys have been with me all the way. Okay, maybe not. Sure. I don't have no idea. Yeah, here it is. And we're going to start there. But let's get back to this unit, shall we? And so, as says there, the communists and the nationalists, the communists led by Mao Zedong, and the nationalists led by Chiang Kai-shek, as he was called, or Cash My Check, because the man was known for his willingness to take a bribe. So the nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek, or Chiang Kai-shek, and the communists under Mao Zedong, a lot of these name pronunciations are simply from the fact that Westerners have a difficult time pronouncing Chinese words. Yeah, and so yeah, that's the problem. Zheng Jieshi is Chiang Kai-shek. So the communists under Mao Zedong and the nationalists will fight a long and bloody civil war that will only subside momentarily when the Japanese invade China, and both the communists and the nationalists unite for a time during World War II to fight the Japanese. 700,000 troops of the Kuomintang surrounded Mao's army of 100,000 and forced them to take desperate action or be annihilated. And so what they did between the year 1935, 34, and 1935, the communists made a journey of 6,000 miles on foot through the mountains and the snow, uphill, both ways. Well, no. But no, I mean, I've read about this. It's called the 1,000-Mile March. And they did. They trekked through mountains. They trekked across, single file across very narrow swing bridges. They trekked across uh, precipitous passes, and a lot of them died along the way. And often, as it says there, staying one step ahead of the Kuomintang. This journey is called the journey of 1,000 miles. The journey of 1,000 miles. So, in 1931, Japan invaded Manchuria and set up the last emperor of China, Henry Puyi, that guy we have watched the movie about, or watching the movie. We're going to see a little bit about that. And his wife, notice his name is Henry Puyi. He changed his name to Henry to resemble a modern European king. And his wife, Elizabeth, became the new monarchs and renamed this puppet state of Manchuria Manchukuo. And that's an interesting story. Nationalism in other parts of Asia triggered independence movements to overthrow the colonial powers there. The end of World War I brought about a weakening of the traditional powers, including Great Britain, and renewed interest in places like India and the former Ottoman Empire for nationalism, independence, and self-determination, self-rule, basically. In India, the Muslims and Hindus found some common cause for nationalism and ridding themselves of British rule. The Hindus formed the Indian National Congress, or the Congress Party, in 1885. The Muslims then founded their own party called the Muslim League in 1906. Until World War I, and 1 million Indians served in the British military. Few Indians actually showed interest in Indian nationalism, but the British promised democratic rule in India. But the British did not live up to their promises, and the Indians reacted with violence and rioting. The British Parliament then passed the Rowland Acts, which allowed the British to imprison people without trial for as long as 2 years. In reaction to these acts, some 10,000 Hindus and Muslims gathered near a place called Amritsar to pray and protest these acts. The British became alarmed. They banned public meetings, and then British soldiers were brought in, and they were ordered to fire on the gathering. And for 10 minutes, shots rained in, killing some 1,200 people. This riot caused the Indians to rally around nationalism. The Amritsar massacre inspired an Indian national by the name of Mohandas K. Gandhi. Probably, I think, the greatest person of the 20th century that you never heard of. Why was he the greatest person of the 20th century? Because Gandhi was able to kick the British out of India without firing a shot. Yeah, it was a miraculous event. He did it through the use of something called Satyagraha. And you say, what's that? Satyagraha means it basically means Gandhi said that the British cannot make 500 million Indians do what 500 million Indians don't want to do. And all we have to do is just resist. We'll fill their jails, they'll get tired of beating us, and eventually they will quit. And that's, in a nutshell, what happened. He was called the Mahatma, which means the great soul. Salt March. Salt March is one of the demonstrations that Gandhi did. You see, the British passed a law. British colonies existed to make money for Great Britain. And one of the ways that the British made money was in monopolizing the salt trade in India. Now, we've talked about this a little bit before. People have to have salt. You must have salt or you will die. And before the British came, the Indians had mined their own salt. Some had even made their own salt, but the British ended that. The British said you cannot make your own salt anymore. You can't mine your own salt anymore. You have to buy our salt. And Gandhi said, no, I'm not. And so he marched 200 miles from, I don't know, someplace in India to the sea, and in the full eyes of the British authorities, made salt, violating the law, and encouraged other Indians to do the same. And they did. The spinning wheel, that was another part of Gandhi's plan. You see, the British grew cotton in India. And of course, when I say the British grew cotton, that meant that Indians grew the cotton. The British simply took it, shipped it to Manchester, turned it into cloth, shipped it back to India, and sold it to the Indians at elevated prices. And Gandhi said, look, if we could just weave our own cloth, the British will be driven from here in a matter of no time. And he was right. And so if you ever look at the Indian flag has a green stripe, a yellow stripe, and a white stripe in between. And in the white stripe, there is a circle. And that circle is a spinning wheel, representative of what Gandhi did. Gandhi also fasted. Gandhi was well thought of in India. And he, in order to show his disapproval of the presence of the British or his disapproval of fighting between Hindus and Muslims, he would fast. He went on a hunger strike. He would not eat. And because the Indian people had so much respect for him, they ceased whatever it is what they were doing. So, in 1935, the British government passed the Government of India Act, which provided some local self-government, self-rule, but not total independence. And this act instead fueled tension between Muslims and Hindus. Remember that India has the world's second largest population of Muslims, but in India, Muslims are a minority. And so there was always conflict with Hindus. The Muslims feared that in a democracy, they would be outvoted always because the Muslims were a minority and left out of the democratic process. In Southwest Asia, the remnants of the Ottoman Empire tried to gain their own independence. Turkey gained independence under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Pasha. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. Ataturk, which means Super Turk, who defeated the Greeks who tried to invade Asia Minor. In 1923, he became modern Turkey's first president and brought about these reforms. Separated the laws of Islam from secular laws, abolished religious courts, and created a new legal system based on European laws. Granted women the right to vote and hold public office, and launched programs to industrialize Turkey. In Persia, the Russians were weakened by the Russian Revolution and a new revolution led by Shah Reza Pahlavi in 1925, who will rule what is now called Iran until 1979. That should be what is now called Iran. Until 1979, when he was overthrown by the current regime. Arabia had been a long been a land of Bedouin tribesmen, but after World War I, they were united under Abd al-Aziz ibn Saud, and in 1932 named the new country Saudi Arabia after his family. He made this into an Islamic republic where the laws were the laws of Islam. Yeah, an Islamic republic is one in which the laws are the laws of Islam. I mean, it means what it says. All civil laws are written in the Quran. He did allow modern technologies, however, and these were funded by one of the world's richest deposits of oil. Oil was then also discovered in Iran, Kuwait, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia. This area became very important as it was discovered that this land held 2/3 of the world's oil reserves. Now, you see this list right here that you have in your study guide? We are going to use that in a matching section. They have entrusted me to make an assessment test for this unit that will be quick to grade, and it will be rather short, and it'll include a lot of these names. Okay, so yes. Let's talk about Europe. With the end of World War I, Europe's absolute monarchies had been disbanded, most of them. However, democracies, while a neat concept, is not always the right answer for all people at all times. The problem with democracy is this. Democracy is like a giant committee. Think about it. Have you ever went out to lunch with two of your friends and you say, hey, where are we going to lunch? Well, nobody can decide. Well, that's what a democracy is like. Only the committee is made up of several million people. Yes, and it's quite, cumbersome. On the other hand, autocracies, fascist governments, can make a decision on a dime. They don't have to worry about getting a consensus. Much of the former German, Austrian, Ottoman, and Russian empires had been broken into many self-governing entities that were discovering all the new problems of self-rule. Even in the established governments of France and Italy, gaining a consensus was near to impossible with the economic conditions left over by the war and the large number of extremist movements. Note that at this time, more and more people will become willing to exchange liberty for security. And that will be a theme for the next 15 years in Europe. Germany came under the control of a new government in 1919 called the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic, while well-intentioned, had too many obstacles to overcome. It had to pay war reparations that were way too expensive. There were more extremist groups like the Nazis, the communists, who told people what they wanted to hear. And what that was that they had been cheated out of World War One, that they had surrendered with an army still in enemy territory, which technically is true. The Great Depression also ended Germany's chances of paying its debt and staying with a moderate government. Inflation raged in the Republic, making the Deutschmark, which was their standard of currency, the standard unit of currency, the Deutschmark, almost worthless. And I actually have this picture I can show you. I'll pull that up when I'm giving this lecture. Then the United States in 1923 passed forward, came up with the Dawes Plan. The Dawes Plan was a way for the Germans to pay down their debt without going bankrupt. But in 1929, in fact, it was working. By 1929, which, by the way, is also the year of the Great Depression, factories were producing what they were before World War One. Germany's foreign minister, Gustav Stresemann, and French foreign minister, Aristide-Briand, tried to mend relations between their two countries. They signed a treaty promising that Germany and France would never make war on each other again. Yeah. These were called the Locarno Accords. And then there was the Kellogg-Briand Pact, which was made between American Secretary of State Brian Kellogg and this same guy, Aristide-Briand. And basically, it was just a document saying that they would never use war again as a tool of foreign policy. But perhaps the biggest factor that ended the chance for world peace was the Great Depression, which is where I think we should stop. Okay? Yeah, that's a good place to stop, if you'll pardon me.